The start of every single year is always the same. People are always overly excited for everything, that this is a new period of life and, new year, new me. This is completely natural, and the beginning of 2020 was no different. But in the real world, 2020 had so many issues. We had World War III nearly starting in January, Australia was set alight, and obviously we had this horrible pandemic that happened. Not all of it has been bad news. A lot of the strides that were made in the gaming industry this year have been huge. So today we're going to go through some of the most important stories and milestones from the gaming industry as a whole, and I hope you guys enjoy it. In January, Sony had taken Nintendo's approach and decided they were no longer going to be appearing at E3 this year. Instead, they wanted to try and do online directs to showcase their products. At the start of this year, this seemed relatively irritating just because it meant that gamers from around the globe would no longer be able to trial the latest hardware and get a first-hand view of all of the new games. Obviously, when you fast forward a few months and it gets to the actual E3, it was cancelled and no one could go anyway because coronavirus. So it wasn't really that much of a big deal, but back in January when this happened, it caused a slight inconvenience for a lot of people in the field. Move into March, and this is when the UK went into lockdown. The pandemic really caused so many issues for every single industry. The gaming industry wasn't as badly affected as, say, film, music, or everyday jobs like hospitality and retail, but it still saw that a large number of releases got delayed. This included games like The Last of Us 2, that was pushed back for a number of months. Halo Infinite has now supposedly been pushed back for an indefinite amount of time, and that was supposed to be the Xbox Series X's launch title, and it still doesn't have a release date, so no one really knows what's going on with it. I would like to add Cyberpunk 2077 in there, but I also feel like that probably deserves its own section. During the first wave of lockdowns, the majority of people were sent back into their homes away from other people and left to socialise with either their cats or just other people online. There was a saving grace during this period when no one could go outside. We were all allowed to hit the beach, go fishing, catch bugs and dig up fossils, all whilst trying to make a beautiful looking island and pay off the terrible debt that we owed to Tom Nook. With the launch of this game being so well timed, it managed to sell so many digital copies so quickly that it even managed to break the record, which was something that no one had expected Nintendo to do, especially considering how they market their online portion of every single console. The game was successful in managing to save so many people from going insane during lockdown, but it also caused a few issues with its launch too. So the Nintendo Switch is the most accessible console because Nintendo have always marketed themselves as a very child-friendly company. With all the kids being off school, it made sense that the parents got them a Switch just to stop them from completely trashing the house. As we recently saw with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, there was a major issue when it came to getting a hold of a Nintendo Switch. If you wanted to buy the Switch Lite, you were going to be pretty much fine, but if you wanted the standard Nintendo Switch, it was going to be very, very difficult for you to get, because people had been using bots to buy up all the Nintendo Switches in order to sell them for a higher price on certain websites to make a profit. During a pandemic, you would have thought people could have been a little bit nicer, but clearly it just wasn't the case. Let's fast forward a couple of months. Suddenly there's a massive fight breaking out between Apple and Epic Games. To explain this in short, Epic basically decided that they wanted to make their in-game currency of V-Bucks cheaper. They weren't able to do this through the App Store, and because of this they ended up adding an internal link into the Epic Games Store through the game as a bypass for people to purchase the V-Bucks. This was deemed as a breach of contract because this meant that Apple were no longer seeing any revenue off this transaction, and as this is a free-to-play game, you can see why that would be considered really annoying for Apple. This opened up a lawsuit and a very public argument between the two companies, mainly with Epic Games being the one shouting about it. To this day, you still can't play Fortnite on your iPhone, and it just goes to show that sometimes you can win the fight, but you can also lose the war. Whilst we're sitting on the conversation of game companies, a terrible story came out this year about Ubisoft and the way that they've been treating their employees. We've heard some terrible things from the company, including cases of sexual harassment and misconduct, and I believe there was also one case of rape. There's also been a lot of other stuff that's happened surrounding their employees and the content creators who are associated with this company. I'll add a link into the description for a guy called Rogue9. This is a Rainbow Six Siege player, and he has a video that can explain his personal experience with a few of the people that run the company, and honestly, it had me shocked. I didn't understand any of what was going on after I heard it. Then we move on to one of my personal highlights for this year. Microsoft bought ZeniMax Studio. This is the parent studio of Bethesda. As a massive fan of Elder Scrolls, this makes me very happy as it means that there's a potential budget increase for the newer Elder Scrolls games, and hopefully it can make them a lot bigger and a lot better. Obviously this has some bad things with it too, like the potential of newer games from Elder Scrolls series being unavailable for the PlayStation. But then people are complaining that Xbox doesn't really have any exclusives, so I feel like this definitely puts a good balance into that argument. If you want to hear more about this topic, I did a video on it a couple of months ago on another channel, and I'll put a link to it just on the info card right there. 2020 has been the year where we said goodbye to everything. We had to say goodbye to our freedom for long periods of time, and sadly we've had to say goodbye to loved ones because of this pandemic. We've also had to say goodbye to Mixer. Mixer has said its final hurrah and it has crumbled, making the larger streamers who were brought over revert back to Twitch. Now for people like Shroud and Ninja, this is great news. Not only did they get paid their entire contract, which I would like to add was a hefty sum, but they can now go back to streaming on the most popular streaming platform that is known on the internet. They can get their numbers back up while still earning more and more money. It's a big win for them, and Microsoft just kind of realised that they couldn't compete with Twitch at the moment, and Mixer was never successful in what they were trying to do. As we were saying goodbye to 2020, it finally happened. The next generation of consoles were released, but as with everything, there was always a downside. With stocks being so limited on launch, despite a national pandemic where everyone seemed to be wanting to try to play games, it was very difficult for most people to get a hold of one. Some people ended up getting defected products, and a lot of issues with the consoles on launch made it very, very rocky to start with. But when there's something completely new and it's just come out, you should always really expect a few bugs. After all, it must be really hard for every single one of them to be found out before the launch, because devs don't really have that much time to sit and play on it for a few months before the launch to make sure that every single thing is perfect. Plus you get all the issues that could happen during the manufacturing process in the factory. So it's not necessarily the fault of Microsoft or Sony for some of the issues that had occurred during this. But both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X were big hits, and they both got taken off the shelves almost minutes after the pre-orders had launched. This is honestly an incredible time for the industry. I'm not going to lie, I am relatively salty because I couldn't get a hold of a pre-order for the Xbox Series X, but I'm sure in time I'll get one. I've got nothing but patience. So at this point, Cyberpunk is something that's gone so heavily wrong, but as this is so recent, it's going to have to probably be its own video. But here it is in short. The game launched dead on the previous generations. It's no longer even in the PlayStation Store for the PS4, and to be quite honest, there's some awful reviews and rumours going around about it at the moment. Personally, I haven't had a chance to play it yet, and I still really do like the look of the game despite all of this. It's the first thing that CD Projekt Red has done that really has got any form of bad reviews on it. But from all the stuff that I've personally seen, I'll put a link in the description for a video by Beat-em-Ups, where he's basically gone in depth and talked about all the things that are wrong with the game. And it doesn't look the best, but I'm still hopeful. Very, very hopeful. Make sure to drop a like down on this video and subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on so you never miss an upload. And if I've missed out on your favourite story this year, then make sure to let me know in the comments what it was, and maybe we'll do a recap on it at some point. Take it easy guys, I'll catch you in the next one, and I hope 2021 is at least slightly better than 2020.